Welcome to Stories of Brave Mothers, a channel dedicated to telling real and touching stories of brave mothers from around the world.
Have you ever wondered how far a brave mother would go to save her own child? Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to find your home surrounded by a raging flood, the water rising fast, your 14-year-old daughter's life hanging by a thread. This isn't a movie scene. It's the true story of Claire, a mother who faced the relentless force of nature, the biting cold, and the deepest fear a parent can feel, all to make sure her little girl came home alive. And what happened that night will stay in your memory forever. It all began on what seemed to be an ordinary autumn morning in a small town in the state of Missouri, USA. The trees were already shedding their leaves, which drifted lazily onto the sidewalks, painting the ground in shades of gold and rust. To an outsider, it looked like one of those peaceful places where nothing bad could ever happen. But behind the calm of that scenery, the life of Claire Evans, a brave mother of 38, was about to be turned upside down. Claire lived with her 14-year-old daughter, Emily, in a modest but cozy home in a residential neighborhood along the banks of the Osage River. She worked part-time as a nurse at the town's hospital, and in her spare hours, she baked cakes to sell at a small local fair. Life wasn't easy, but Claire always found a way to put food on the table, keep the house in order, and above all, be there for Emily, her reason for living. Emily's father had left when she was just 2 years old. From that moment on, Claire took on everything by herself, and even with all the hardships, she never complained. She always said, "As long as I'm breathing, Emily will have what she needs, even if I have to cross an entire river with her in my arms." She had no idea that one day, those words would take on a literal meaning. Emily was a sweet, sensitive teenager, deeply bonded with her mother. The two shared a rare kind of closeness, the kind that made people smile just by watching them. Friday nights were sacred. They'd make popcorn, watch old movies on the couch, and laugh until late. Claire spared no effort to create a safe and loving environment for her daughter. She knew all too well the weight of absence, and she was determined to give Emily everything she herself had never had. But that week, the calm in their home began to show cracks. Heavy rains had been battering the state for days, and news reports were starting to warn of possible flooding. True to her protective nature, Claire began monitoring the weather alerts closely. Still, local authorities didn't seem worried. "Just seasonal rains," they said. "Everything's under control." On Thursday afternoon, Claire picked Emily up from school, as she always did. The sky was dark, but the rain had eased for the moment. Emily hopped into the car, excitedly telling her mother about an essay her teacher had praised. Claire smiled, trying to seem calm, but inside, she felt a tightness in her chest. Something was in the air, a feeling she couldn't explain. Later that night, as she tucked Emily into bed, Claire whispered a silent prayer. She asked for protection. She asked that if something bad had to happen, it would happen to her, not to her little girl. She wasn't a particularly religious woman, but that night, she prayed with her whole heart, a mother's heart, sensing what her eyes could not yet see. By dawn, everything had changed. At 3:47, Claire woke to a strange sound, a muffled noise, like something dragging along the street. She got up quietly, slipped on her slippers, and walked to the living room window. When she pulled back the curtain, her body froze. The street was completely flooded. Water was already halfway up the car tires, and worse, it was still rising. Claire rushed to Emily's room, shaking her awake. "Em, get up, now!" The girl opened her eyes, startled and groggy, taking a moment to understand. "Mom," she murmured. Claire held her tight. "We have to leave. The house could be flooded any moment." Emily threw on a coat, and together they hurried downstairs. The power was already out. The house felt dark, damp, and eerily silent, except for the sound of water growing louder outside. Claire opened the front door, her heartbeat pounding. The water was already lapping at the steps of the porch. Without wasting a second, she grabbed the emergency backpack she always kept ready. Documents, flashlights, medicine, water, and took her daughter's hand. "Come on, sweetheart, now." But the moment they stepped outside, the current hit them. The water was far stronger than either of them had imagined. Claire struggled to keep her balance as waves slammed against them. Emily slipped, nearly being swept away, but Claire gripped her tightly, clinging to the porch railing with her other hand. Neighbors were emerging from their homes, shouting, calling out for loved ones. It was a silent chaos, like a nightmare, unfolding in slow motion, and the water kept rising. Claire knew they couldn't get far on foot. Her eyes darted around until she spotted Mr. Henry's pickup truck next door, partially submerged, but the cabin was still accessible. She fought her way through the current with Emily, as though battling an invisible army. "Go! Climb in!" she yelled, helping Emily through the passenger window. Soaked and shaking, the girl crawled inside. Claire followed, breathless. From the top of the truck's cabin, they could see the neighborhood transformed into a swirling, muddy river. Inside, Claire tried to think. They needed to get to higher ground. The school might be safer, but the truck wouldn't start, and walking there was dangerous. "I'll protect you, my love. I promise," she whispered, looking into her daughter's eyes. Emily cried softly against her mother's shoulder. The temperature was dropping. Time was against them. If they stayed, they risked being swept away, or freezing to death. But if they left, they'd face one of nature's fiercest forces. Something inside Claire ignited. Every ounce of survival instinct, every drop of strength a brave mother could summon, surged within her. She knew she couldn't wait. Her daughter's safety depended on her, and only her. She gripped the backpack with one hand, wrapped Emily in the thickest coat she had, and pulled her out of the truck. "Trust me, just follow me, and don't let go of my hand, no matter what." They moved slowly, wading through what used to be their street. Claire led the way, feeling for solid ground beneath the water to avoid open drains or holes. The water now reached her waist. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Little by little, the current began to overpower her. In a moment of pure panic, Claire felt her legs give way. Emily slipped again. This time, the current yanked her hard. Claire let go of the backpack and dove after her, heart pounding in her throat. And that was when the real fight began. The current dragged Claire and Emily several yards downstream before Claire managed to plant her feet against something solid, a nearly submerged mailbox that, against all odds, was holding its ground against the raging water. With one quick pull, she brought Emily close, hugging her so tightly it was as if she wanted to fuse their bodies into one. The girl coughed, gulping down air and water in turns. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and tears. "Mom, I thought I was going to..." The sentence broke off, swallowed by a sob. Claire cupped her daughter's face with a trembling hand, even as her own muscles burned from exhaustion. "You're not, my love. I won't let you." The problem was, promising was easy. Reality was getting more terrifying by the second. The water was already up to Claire's shoulders, and the icy wind cut like blades. Lightning slashed across the sky, briefly revealing the chaotic scene. Planks of wood, cans, chairs, even a bicycle being swept away by the current. Claire knew staying put meant being dragged off again. They needed to reach higher ground, and fast. She scanned the surroundings, searching for anything safe. That's when she saw it. 2 blocks away, the steeple of the Methodist church, the only building in the neighborhood towering above the rooftops. If they could make it there, they could shelter on the upper floor. "Hold on to my neck. Don't let go for anything," Claire told her. hoisting Emily onto her back the way she used to when her daughter was small. Emily obeyed, wrapping her arms and legs tightly around her mother, feeling her heartbeat pound like a war drum. The crossing was a brutal test of endurance. Each step was a battle against the water's force, which seemed intent on ripping them off the ground. At times, Claire had to brace herself against poles and fences to avoid losing her balance. Each lightning flash gave her a fleeting glimpse of the path ahead and of the dangers it held. Halfway there, they heard a cry for help. It came from a house to their left, partially submerged. An older woman stood at a second-floor window, waving frantically. Claire's heart clenched. She wanted to help, but any detour could cost them dearly. Emily, sensing her mother's dilemma, spoke in a trembling voice. "Mom, we have to keep going." The decision cut deep. Claire nodded, murmuring to herself, "I'll come back. If God allows, I'll come back." And she pressed on, the emotional weight now matching the physical. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp stench of gasoline and mud. Every step felt unstable, as if the ground could vanish beneath them. Then, in a critical moment, Claire's foot found an unseen hole underwater, and she plunged up to her neck, nearly losing Emily. With a swift push, she resurfaced, coughing and gasping for air. "Are you okay, Mom?" Emily's voice sounded more fragile by the minute. Claire answered firmly, even as her own body screamed otherwise. "I'm fine, and you will be too. Just a little further." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the church gate. But there was a new problem. The gate was chained shut, and the water already covered half its height. Claire looked up and spotted a small side window about 6 feet above the waterline. I need your help now." She steadied herself against a floating plank, lifted Emily onto her shoulders, and with every last ounce of strength, raised her toward the window. "Unlock it, sweetheart! Push it up!" Shivering, Emily managed to force it open just enough to create a gap. With a quick movement, she squeezed inside, then reached her hand back out for her mother. Claire, however, was running out of strength. Her legs no longer obeyed her, and the cold made her shiver uncontrollably. But when she saw her daughter's hand, steady and waiting, she found energy she didn't know she still had. In one final effort, she grabbed the ledge and hauled herself inside, collapsing to her knees on the church's wet floor. Emily hugged her instantly, crying with relief. For several minutes, they stayed there, breathing hard, trying to figure out their next move. But the danger wasn't over. Through the window, they could see the water continuing to rise. Worse still, a loud crack echoed from the building's structure, as if the church itself was fighting to withstand the flood's force. Claire knew that even here, safety wouldn't last long. The storm showed no sign of stopping, and the next choice might be the hardest of all: remain in an unstable shelter, or risk another escape in search of something safer. At that moment, as the water lapped against the inner steps, Claire realized their fight had only just begun. The sound of rain on the church roof was like an endless drumbeat. Claire and Emily were drenched, shivering, their hair plastered to their faces, their bodies drained. The air inside carried the scent of soaked wood and long-extinguished candles. Through the cracks in the windows, the storm made it clear it wasn't over, and from the roar outside, the current seemed even stronger than when they had arrived. With each passing minute, the water inside the church crept higher. First, it swallowed the steps leading to the altar. Then it began advancing down the central aisle, slowly engulfing the wooden pews. Claire watched, feeling her protective instinct roar inside her. It didn't matter that she was exhausted, her body aching, her hands scraped raw. Emily's life was her absolute priority. She held her daughter's face in both hands and spoke firmly, even though fear churned inside her. "We're getting out of here, Em, and we're getting out together." Emily bit her lip, fighting back tears. Her wide, frightened eyes still reflected the trust she had in her mother. That trust was what kept Claire going. Then, a new sound broke through the storm. Something heavy in the current slammed into the church's side wall. The impact shook part of the structure, and Claire knew they couldn't wait any longer. The building, though solid, wasn't built to withstand this kind of force. She scanned the space quickly, thinking fast. The upper part of the tower might offer better safety, but to get there, they would have to cross the main hall, now almost entirely underwater. The stairs were on the far side, and the path had become a river of freezing, muddy water. Claire took a deep breath. She went to the window they had come through and saw, outside, a massive tree trunk wedged between two houses. The idea came almost instinctively. If they could reach it, they might be able to use it as a bridge to a higher street, but it meant returning to the current that had nearly taken them hours before. Emily sensed her mother's conflict and whispered, "Mom, I trust you." Those words were fuel to Claire. She squeezed her daughter's hand, adjusted the backpack, which she had managed to recover minutes earlier, and got ready. She pushed the window open, letting wind and rain whip inside, and helped Emily out first. The water was even colder and faster now. Claire kept her arm around her daughter's waist, moving slowly, deliberately. The trunk was only about 30 feet away, but each yard felt like a battlefield. Objects drifted and spun past. Fence posts, fuel cans, even a metal gate. When they reached the trunk, Claire positioned Emily first, helping her climb up. But just as Claire tried to follow, a powerful wave slammed into them, nearly knocking them away. Claire gripped Emily's arm so hard her fingers ached. "Climb, Em!" she shouted, her voice breaking. Emily managed to get onto the trunk, but Claire was left clinging to it, the current pulling at her legs. And then came the moment she would never forget. Emily, trembling, tears in her eyes, leaned down, reached out, and pulled her mother back. Claire could hardly believe her daughter's strength. Not physical, but emotional. Together, they steadied themselves and began making their way across the slippery log toward the edge of the higher street. The trunk was slick, and one wrong step could have been fatal. Claire went first, clearing the way, with Emily right behind, watching each step carefully. After what felt like hours, they reached a small patch of concrete, where the current had lost much of its force. For the first time since the early morning, they could breathe a little easier. Claire looked at Emily and saw she was still trembling, but standing, alive, and looking back at her with the same love as always. That's when they heard voices. Not far away, a group of volunteers in orange vests were passing in inflatable boats, rescuing stranded residents. Claire waved her arms and shouted as loud as she could. The storm's roar nearly drowned her out, but one of the rescuers spotted them and signaled to wait. The rescue was swift. Within minutes, Claire and Emily were in the boat, wrapped in blankets, hearing comforting words. Claire kept glancing back at the neighborhood that now looked more like part of a river. The houses, the streets, everything had changed. But inside her, something remained untouched. The promise she had made to her daughter, and kept. Emily rested her head on her mother's shoulder and murmured, "You saved my life." Claire kissed her daughter's forehead, eyes brimming. "And I'd do it again, 1,000 times." When they finally arrived at the emergency shelter set up in the town's school, relief mixed with sorrow for what had been lost. Many families were still being rescued. Some hadn't been as lucky. Claire helped however she could, offering water, blankets, and words of comfort to those arriving. In the days that followed, the floodwaters receded, but the marks of the tragedy lingered in every corner of the city. Claire and Emily returned home, or to what was left of it. The walls were stained, the furniture destroyed, and a heavy silence filled the air. Still, Claire smiled at her daughter. "We'll rebuild, our way." And they did. With the help of neighbors, friends, and even strangers, they restored part of their home. But the strongest thing rebuilt wasn't the walls or the roof. It was the bond between mother and daughter, now even more unshakable. At 14, Emily had seen firsthand what it meant to have a brave mother, one who faced the impossible, crossed violent, unforgiving waters, and still found the strength to smile in the end. On the first Friday after their return, Claire made popcorn. The couch was a little crooked, the walls still bare, but tradition had to go on. Sitting together under a blanket, they exchanged knowing glances, and for the first time since the flood, they laughed, truly laughed, because in the end, survival wasn't just about escaping the water. It was about continuing to live with love, hope, and courage. Stories like Claire and Emily's remind us that the love of a brave mother can face any storm and win. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover other mothers who have also defied the impossible. Leave a like so more people can feel the power of this message. And share it with someone you love, because in the end, what truly matters is having someone by your side to cross life's floods together.